One of the two, the other was yesterday, organised by civil society members. The first special representative of the Secretary-General of Cambodia often noted the vibrant civil and active civil society that had emerged in the aftermath of the Paris Peace Agreements and was a characteristic of the new Cambodia. It was symbolic of Cambodia, and it was also very appropriate, therefore, that you're organising these commemorative events. The Paris Peace Accords, as you know, did not end completely the conflict in this country. That took time. The conflict was extremely complex, both at the national level and with the involvement of a range of international powers. To overcome these complexities and to reach an international guaranteed comprehensive settlement to restore peace was a formidable achievement, even looking back on it today, especially looking back on it today. The Paris Peace Accords were a result of intense negotiations and critical dialogue between a number of warring factors and a number of factors with different political views. Dialogue proved possible and was in the interests of all Cambodians. I was reminded of this strongly when I read of the military exercises in the last few weeks in and around Phnom Penh, and I read of the growing rhetoric about bloodshed and returns to conflict in this country. When the Prime Minister himself feels the need to call for a ceasefire just before Phnom Penh, the Paris Peace Accords, I would hope, should inspire those involved to de-escalate the current tensions and address more actively a political solution to the current situation. For me, as Special Rapporteur, the Paris Peace Accords have two main resonances in contemporary society. Firstly, looking at the groundwork for national elections, and secondly, looking at the groundwork for human rights. Firstly, with elections, Annex 5 of the Paris Peace Accords provided for the new Cambodia to have a liberal democracy on the basis of pluralism with periodic and genuine elections, and the right to vote, universal and equal suffrage, and full and fair opportunities for all to organise and participate in the electoral process. It also provided for political neutrality within the state and military. Looking at human rights, the Paris Peace Accords laid the foundation for the new constitution of Cambodia, Article 31 of which has a very strong statement on the need for protection for human rights and the prohibition on discrimination in the enjoyment of rights and freedoms on any grounds. Articles 3 and 15 of both the agreements in the Paris Accords note that the rights of all Cambodians are guaranteed to undertake activities to promote and to respect human rights. Human rights defenders are not necessarily political actors, and the mere act of defending human rights should not politicise those actions of those involved. Clearly, the dividends of peace have been enormous in this country, as anyone who's visited Cambodia over the last 25 years can attest. Without doubt, there's been a dramatic pace and extent of recovery and development. However, whilst the Paris Peace Accords were obviously fundamental and allowed for the lifting of many international embargoes, the development has not been enjoyed equally by all Cambodians. And it's essential to look at addressing the Sustainable Development Goals and strengthening the position of human rights in Cambodia to make sure that those that are more vulnerable have their rights protected as well. The focus on leaving no one behind is a valid message today, and yet is echoed in the non-discrimination principles in the Constitution. The gaps between urban and rural, between rich and poor, between men and women, those with disabilities, those with not, remain particular issues today that Cambodia has to look at. Looking at the specific topics I was asked to address earlier, I think that moving forward, it's clear that Cambodia has made progress with human rights. There is now a legal basis in Cambodian law for many rights and freedoms mentioned in the Paris Peace Accords, and obviously that's one of the main foundations of a strong rule of law society, is to ensure you have good laws that give effect to the international human rights obligations accepted by the state. What remains to be done is to ensure that those laws are applied fairly and equally to all without discrimination, and that those laws are applied in a way which gives effect to the international human rights treaty obligations which Cambodia has freely and so repeatedly chosen to accept. There remain clear challenges with the laws that impede or limit freedom of expression. I have particular concerns with some of the standards of proof in criminal law and criminal procedure code, and with the criminalisation of offences such as defamation. With respect to freedom of assembly and association, the law on peaceful demonstration and the implementing guidelines provide a framework, but there is much work to be done in disseminating these guidelines, particularly in the provinces, and ensuring that they are adhered to and respected. I hear too many times comments from NGOs and civil societies about the limitations on their lawful activities, particularly at the provincial level. So more has to be done to ensure the key terms of the law are upheld in Cambodia. I think there's no doubt that many aspects of the Paris Peace Accords remain relevant today. Cambodia has yet to fulfil the aspirations of the parties to the Paris Peace Agreements, particularly with respect to guaranteeing and enshrining human rights that are that are subject to basically oversight by a strong and empowered independent judiciary. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. May I also introduce Wan Ili, who is a OHCHR representative to Cambodia. You have been here, how many years you have been in Cambodia?
3, but it feels like much more.
So this is her third visit to the country, right? This is your third visit?
No, it's my third visit as rapporteur. It's about my 20th visit, I think, to Cambodia or more.
Okay, officially as a special rapporteur, this is your third visit. This is your third year for you, but you will feel much more than 3 years, right? Okay, glad to introduce a few words.
I spoke on this subject yesterday, so I don't have many new things to add. It's just that I am appreciative of the activities that have been organized yesterday and today by civil society to complement the official activities around the Paris Peace Accords. And that is what was missing, I think, was precisely this, the look at the human rights lens, the stock taking and the lessons learning. A commemoration should be much more than a commemoration. It should be a time to think, to be forward-looking. And so quite a bit of that has been said throughout the day, no doubt. And I'm sorry that we couldn't hear all of it. But when the lessons come forward from this, and I hope that rich recommendations, I hope that the regional solidarity has come out of this meeting and showing us some ways to face the future. I think those of us that are here in country feel that there's a great deal of uncertainty in front of us. I think it helps to see from around the region and around the world that Cambodia is not the only country to be going through this process, as difficult as it is. And regional and international networks, this solidarity is extremely important when we face times of increasing restrictions. And well, this is not the most remote place in the world. but when circumstances like this unfold, one can feel quite isolated if one is on the receiving end of things. So I'll say that much. I won't add to the stock taking that I'm sure has been very rich. But I would just like to thank the organizers and all those here for taking part in this exercise. And we in OETHR join you in looking forward to drawing the lessons from it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Manili. So now floor is open. So if you have any question, we can have the Q&A and also discussion on any issue you might be interested. Anybody wants to raise question? Yes.
I think I asked again.
Could you please identify yourself?
Thank you, but I prefer to speak Khmer. Can you just put your headphones? Aku sudah berdoa kah hariខ្ញុំសួរតាមពិតនេះគឺជាសំណួរស្តៀងគ្នាតាំងពី panel មុនដែរប៉ុន្តែជាសំណួរដែលខ្ញុំចង់បន្ថែមដោយសារតែខ្ញុំគិតថាកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងសន្តិភាពក្រុងប៉ារីសនេះគឺសំខាន់សម្រាប់អាយុជីវិតជនជាតិខ្មែរគ្រប់ចំនួនមិនមែនតែចំនួនខ្ញុំប៉ុន្តែគ្រប់ចំនួនទាំងអស់ចាប់ផ្ដើមពីចុះហត្ថលេខា23តុលា91នឹងមកប៉ុន្តែគឺខ្ញុំតាំងពីខ្ញុំដឹងក្តីមកគឺយើងមើលឃើញថាកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងសន្តិភាពនោះអត់បានអនុវត្តទេទីមួយអត់អនុវត្តហ្នឹងក៏ខ្ញុំគ្រាន់តែចង់បញ្ចេញគំនិតតិចទេវាមានមូលហេតុផ្សេងដែលខ្ញុំព្យាយាមសិក្សារយៈពេលមួយឆ្នាំចុងក្រោយហ្នឹងគឺដោយសារតែភាពបរាជ័យហើយខ្ញុំមើលឃើញអញ្ចឹងថាជាភាពបរាជ័យរបស់អ៊ុនតាក់នៅក្នុងកំឡុងពេល91ដល់93ហ្នឹងมันបានធ្វើឲ្យប្រព័ន្ធតុលាការប្រព័ន្ធយុត្តិធម៌ដែលមានទាំងប៉ូលីសមានទាំងទាហានប្រព័ន្ធសេដ្ឋកិច្ចហើយនិងប្រព័ន្ធព័ត៌មាននឹងអត់ឯករាជ្យអញ្ចឹងមុននឹងអ៊ុនតាក់ក៏ចេញទៅគឺប្រព័ន្ធដែលជាប្រព័ន្ធដឹកនាំក្បាលម៉ាស៊ីនរបស់សង្គមខ្មែរនឹងអត់ទាន់បានឯករាជ្យទេអញ្ចឹងពេលដែលគាត់ចេញទៅមិនដឹងថាកំហុសមកពីអ៊ុនតាក់ឬក៏កំហុសមកពីការដឹកនាំរបស់រដ្ឋនៅពេលហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំនឹងអត់និយាយអំពីអតីតកាលថាហេតុអីប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំចង់បញ្ជាក់ថាមូលហេតុសំខាន់នៃការរំលោភសិទ្ធិមនុស្សហើយនឹងការធ្វើឲ្យលទ្ធិប្រជាធិបតេយ្យនៅសង្គមខ្មែរនឹងបរាជ័យសម្រាប់ខ្ញុំគិតថាបរាជ័យពីព្រោះម្សិលមិញខាងបងព្រៀបកុលខាង TI គាត់បានធ្វើបទបង្ហាញហើយថាជនជាតិខ្មែរដែលបានធ្វើបំពេញទម្រង់ហ្នឹងគឺ 90% អត់ជឿថាប្រព័ន្ធតុលាការឯករាជ្យទេហើយប្រព័ន្ធព័ត៌មានក្នុងសង្គមខ្មែរមិនថាបច្ចុប្បន្នមិនថាទូរទស្សន៍ក៏មិនបានឯករាជ្យដែរដូច្នេះការផ្ដល់ព័ត៌មានអំពីសិទ្ធិមនុស្សអំពីលទ្ធិប្រជាធិបតេយ្យអត់មានអញ្ចឹងគាត់ខ្ញុំចង់និយាយមាន4គឺនយោបាយនៅសង្គមខ្មែរអត់មានសេរីភាពអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំគាត់សុំតែពីរឃ្លាទៀតទេគឺតាក់ទងទៅនឹងបញ្ហាសម្បទានសេដ្ឋកិច្ចមិនថាដីមិនថាវប្បធម៌មិនថានយោបាយគឺយើងសម្បទានសេដ្ឋកិច្ចគេដែលខ្ញុំចង់សួរទៅខាងអ្នករាយការណ៍ពិសេស rapporteur គឺថាតើអង្គការសហជាតិនៅប្រចាំនៅស្រុកខ្មែរហ្នឹងអាចធ្វើអ្វីខ្លះបើសិនបើក្នុងករណីរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាមិនបានអនុវត្តនៅកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងក្រុងប៉ារីសនឹងឲ្យបានពេញលេញតើជនជាតិខ្មែរមានកាតព្វកិច្ចមានទួនាទីអីដើម្បីអាចឲ្យការអនុវត្តកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងក្រុងប៉ារីសនឹងអាចដំណើរការបានបើសិនរដ្ឋាភិបាលខ្មែរឬក៏រដ្ឋាភិបាលទាំង18ដែលចុះហត្ថលេខានឹងមិនអនុវត្តនៅកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងក្រុងប៉ារីសនោះ
Okay, thank you very much. Let me collect 2 more questions and then okay. Introduce yourself and then make it brief, please.
ចាខ្ញុំសូមនិយាយខ្មែរដែរខ្ញុំឈ្មោះសឿនកេតសេរីលក្ខមកពីអង្គការ Khmer ចាខ្ញុំរីករាយមែនទែនបានជួបអ្នកតំណាងពិសេសរបស់អង្គការសហជីវជាតិទាក់ទងនឹងសិទ្ធិមនុស្សនេះចានៅកម្ពុជាខ្ញុំតាមការសង្កេតរបស់អ្នកខ្ញុំមើលឃើញថារៀងរាល់អ្នកតំណាងពិសេសមកប្រទេសកម្ពុជាភាគច្រើនផ្ដោតទៅលើការគោរពសិទ្ធិមនុស្សអីច្រើនមែនទែនប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំតែគិតថាចុះបញ្ហាស្ត្រីដែលបានកើតឡើងជាពិសេសមានការរំលោភសេពសន្តិវៈការជួញដូរស្ត្រីកុមារហើយនិងក្មេងស្រីមួយចំនួនដែលមានទទួលការជួយចាប់ពី សកម្មភាពទៅនឹងឲ្យតាមរបាយការណ៍របស់អ្នកដែលឯកទេសរឿងការពារសិទ្ធិស្ត្រីសិទ្ធិកុមារហ្នឹងគឺថារៀងរាល់ឆ្នាំមានការកើនឡើងទៀតហើយក្នុងរបាយការណ៍ខ្ញុំចង់ឃើញថាតើមានការគិតគូរបែបណាទាក់ទងនឹងការគោរពសិទ្ធិមនុស្សដែលជាសិទ្ធិស្ត្រីជាសិទ្ធិមនុស្សហ្នឹងនៅក្នុងរបាយការណ៍របស់អ្នកតំណាងពិសេសរបស់អង្គការសហប្រជាជាតិហ្នឹងចាហើយចំនួនស្ត្រីដែលជាតំណាងចប់ឆ្នោតនោះក៏មាននៅតែមានចំនួនតិចអំណាចសិទ្ធិអំណាចពេញលេញរបស់គាត់ហ្នឹងនៅមានកម្រិតទៀតចាហើយកម្ពុជាជាក់ស្ដែង2015ហ្នឹងគាត់មានទទួលការបរាជ័យមែនទែនទាក់ទងនឹងការ CMDG គោលដៅអភិវឌ្ឍសហស្វត្តកម្ពុជាត្រូវទទួលបរាជ័យដោយសារចំនួននឹងអត់បានតាមដែលបានដាក់កំណត់ខ្លួនឯងនឹងចាសូមអរគុណ
Okay, thank you very much. It's a question about women's rights. Okay, let me. How many hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me take one more, and then I give a chance to Miss Pan, and then second round. Okay, yes, please.
បាទសូមអរគុណដែលបានផ្ដល់ឱកាសខ្ញុំបានសួរសំណួរខ្ញុំបានឈ្មោះសូមរីខ្ញុំធ្វើការនៅបណ្ដាញយុវជនកម្ពុជាខ្ញុំមានសំណួរខ្លីទេបាទដោយសារតែការបោះឆ្នោតឆ្នាំ2017 2018ជិតឈានចូលមកដល់ហើយអញ្ចឹងពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងខ្ញុំមានសំណួរពីរចង់ដឹងថាតើអង្គការសហជីវជាតិជាពិសេសមាន Professor Rona Smith នេះតើគាត់នឹងមានយុទ្ធសាស្ត្រអីខ្លះក្នុងការជំរុញឲ្យរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាធានាការបោះឆ្នោតប្រកបដោយភាពត្រឹមត្រូវនិងយុត្តិធម៌ចំណុចមួយទៀតពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងសេណារីយ៉ូនយោបាយចុះប្រសិនបើឧទាហរណ៍ថាគណៈបកប្រឆាំងឈ្នះហើយគណៈបកប្រជាជនមិនព្រមប្រគល់អំណាចដោយសន្តិវិធីតើអង្គការសហប្រជាជាតិមានយុទ្ធសាស្ត្របែបម៉េចដើម្បីគៀងគរឲ្យប្រទេសហត្ថលេខីនៃទីក្រុងទីសញ្ញាក្រុងប៉ារីសហ្នឹងឲ្យប្រទេសអ្នកនយោបាយកម្ពុជាហ្នឹងអនុវត្តតាមស្មារតីនៃកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងណាបាទសូមអរគុណ
Okay, thank you very much. So, question about the forthcoming election 2017.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for the question. I think with respect to I missed some of the first comments because the headphones, the first set wasn't working, so I apologise. But I think the questions on UNTAC and the questions on UN strategies are something that probably Wan Lee can address because I don't work for the UN, so I don't have knowledge on UN country planning or strategies. So with those two aspects of the questions, it's not for me to address. With respect to other aspects you raised about the implementation of the Paris Peace Accords, from a strictly international law point of view, they were agreements reached by a number of international and internal parties that were then notified to the United Nations, and it is for those parties to ensure that the accords are respected and are implemented. From my point of view, I have a mandate from the United Nations to look at aspects of human rights. So consequently, that's where most of my attention has to be focused. The Paris Peace Accords most certainly provided that there would be an independent judiciary capable of enforcing human rights respected in the Paris Peace Accords. At present, that is not what has happened. So there's still, as I said in my opening remarks, there's still some way to go to securing a full independent judiciary that also appears to be independent and applies the law consistently without discrimination on any ground. So with that, yes, I would certainly agree. With economic land concessions, land continues to be a very problematic and complex issue in Cambodia. And the government appears to be aware of the challenges with economic land concessions and with land titling generally, both individual under Directive 01 and also communal land titles for Indigenous peoples. There is still no comprehensive approach to addressing the problems of land concessions, or reverted or cancelled land concessions are equally problematic, and there's land concessions for a number of different reasons, as you know, in Cambodia. So there's still more work to be done. The Minister of Justice does appear to be aware that a lot of work needs to be done on the judiciary, and he is usually, firstly, reinforcing the judiciary as independent, and secondly, always replying that there are reforms planned, or they'll look into doing something to address many of the concerns that are raised. The Ministry of Rural Development, as was, and now the Ministry of Land Management, and the previous Ministry of Land Management, they also commented that they were aware of a lot of the issues on land concessions, as did the Minister of Education in various meetings. So I think the government is aware, but that's not an excuse. Action is required to assure that everyone has got some form of land title to their land and can enjoy the free and full possession of it. And there's a need to ensure that every human right is subject to monitoring and enforcement by an independent judiciary who can apply the rule of law to ensure human rights at the international level are used as a means, a tool for applying national law in a manner that renders them compatible. So there's work to be done, I think, with that. With respect to looking at women's rights, I think without doubt there is a need to have a degree of gender mainstreaming across government ministries, and I spoke to the Ministry of Women's Affairs yesterday, and Her Excellency assured me that they are working to try to ensure gender mainstreaming across all ministries, and the work feed into the work of ministries. Quite clearly, there is a lot more to be done on ensuring equal representation of women at all political levels, and also to ensuring that women have equal rights in general in society. Some aspects of the law do provide for equality, and the reality is different. Other aspects of the law don't necessarily fully protect the rights of women, so it's a mixed situation in that. But certainly the Ministry of Women's Affairs seems to be engaged with the idea of trying to feed into a range of activities, either through the Ministry or through the National Council on Women, to try to raise the profile of women's rights. Looking at the elections pending for the next 2 years, I think that there is much work to be done to ensure the elections are undertaken, even in accordance with the standard laid down for those first elections post the Paris Peace Accords. Because therein, the emphasis was on ensuring that they had full and free elections, and ensuring that all Cambodians were eligible to vote in the elections. And there is much still to be done with the voter registration process in the NEC to ensure that everyone is eligible to vote and has the necessary documentation. With respect to the international community, I can't speak for the UN, but with respect to the international community, many governments are closely monitoring the lead up to the elections, and many countries have been discussing the possibility of monitoring the elections. Your final question raised what can be done if the opposition win the election and the current government don't transfer power. I think in strict international human rights it's very simple. Whoever wins an election that is full and fair is the government that's elected to run the country. There's not really any room for negotiation on that. If the position arises, it's one that will have to be done in accordance with the will of the international community to pressure, and also with the will of the Cambodians to bring pressure to bear to ensure that the credible election results are translated into reality. I don't have a crystal ball, it's probably lucky, it might be too scary to look into, but I don't know what the future will bring. But obviously, from a legal point of view, that's the position, which is probably stating the obvious. And I should also say there's no room for violence. I mean, that goes without saying, and the army should be neutral in accordance with the Constitution of Cambodia and the rules of neutrality laid down in the Paris Peace Accords.
How to say something useful and honest, and at this stage, one thing I comes up again and again. So one point I'd like to make really very, very clear. The United Nations is here to accompany countries and the people of those countries in their development process, including political development, including others. But the United Nations, UNTAC was really very, very particular, and that seems to have left this image that the United Nations can just come in at some point and rectify things and leave the country in a better state than before. There are such missions, peacekeeping missions, peace-building missions, but they are really very complex, the calculations behind them, what they are to achieve. Each mission is very unique, and to have the United Nations transcend on a country as we did during the UNTAC period, I think it has to be set aside. It was a particular moment in history, and today in Cambodia, what is the way forward is to think how we can accompany the people of Cambodia forward, but we cannot take the place. We cannot rectify all the wrongs, but we are there observing, we are there bringing life, we are there encouraging for the right actions to take. And we continue this path with the people of Cambodia. Can the United Nations compel the 18 signatory countries to take? Those 18 signatory countries plus 175 more are our bosses. We cannot compel them in any way any more than they can compel any other government. Otherwise, we're entering the world of real politics, and this is human rights standards apart, and that's I think a question of approach and strategy that is beyond a single organization to answer. And in fact, it's very good to have that kind of a discussion here to think really what can be done. My sense is that the human rights organizations are playing their part, really above and beyond the call of duty, signaling what needs to be signaled, and also constructively lending a hand through assistance, through programs, through empowering people and helping duty bearers to play their role. But how do you turn an unwilling duty bearer into a willing one? I think is a good question for all of us. I don't have the answer.
Thank you very much. So let's go to second round of questions. 1, 2, 3 first, and then 2 later. Can you start from this side? Please identify yourself briefly.
Thank you. My name is Ical Supriyadi from Indonesia. I'm working with ANFREL, National Network for Fair Election based in Bangkok, Thailand. Actually, part of my question already been addressed by friends from Cambodia Youth Networks. Is about electoral things. But then it's pushed me forward for from your statements about a company, because we are here is representing at least 3 components of the national, regional, civil society, as well as diplomat and member of parliament. So actually, maybe you can share or what kind of things that we can do in the current future to, let's say, to push to correcting or to addressing the human rights situation right now, at least to make those political prisoners to be free as soon as possible. Borrowing your terms, like what we can do to accompany your endeavor here. And I understand if you cannot tell frankly, maybe you can signaling us what actually the national that need to be pushed forward, what is actually regional organization that can be pushed, and also member parliament attending here what we can do and bring home and do our homeworks. So playing in between two lines, accompany and then signaling. Thank you so much.
Very diplomatic. Okay, thank you. Okay, second question, please. Okay, and then sorry, you got the microphone first.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't see you make a move. My fault. Very good afternoon. Thank you for your presence today. It's a great honor. My name is Scorpio. I'm the Executive Director of Transparency International Cambodia. I have one question and a request. First, I begin with my question. I understand that the Memorandum of Understanding MOU between the UN OHCR office and the government is still pending at the moment. My question is, how does this absence of the official MOU have an impact on your role, both at the UN agency to Madame Lee and to you as a special rapporteur? Did or does you feel any constraints in fulfilling your duty without an official MOU with the Cambodian government? I know that the president of the UN OHCHR is also one of the fruits of the Paris Peace Agreement as well. So how does that mean to the Paris Peace Agreement if the MOU is not going to continue or renew? The second point is my request. It is to our observation that there are some segments of the society who try to forget the Paris Peace Agreement, or to make it even worse, to bury the Paris Peace Agreement. And you see the Phnom Penh Post this morning, today, the government spokesperson say that the Paris Peace Agreement is no longer pertinent or relevant to Cambodia. So my request, because there's a big segment of society, to bring Paris Peace Accord to be alive and fully active. So my request is that, is it possible for you as a special rapporteur and to the UN to try to help establish an institution who can support the monitoring or assessment of the implementation of the Paris Peace Accord? If it is at the UN body, it would be perfect, or at least a funding mechanism to support an international organization or groups of organization combined of international and local to put, some radar on the monitoring and assessment of the Paris Peace Agreement. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very interesting. Usually in other countries, UN concerned about NGO, but here NGOs concerned about UN. For us. So thank you for your concern. So that means we need to work together, right? We have a common mission, so we are in the same boat. Okay, so next question, please.
Thank you, Asimo, and good afternoon, Madam Special Reporter. Nice to see you again, and also Madam Lee. I would make my question short, and first of all, I'm Sophia from Cambodian Center for Human Rights, and probably my first question, not really overlap, but link with brief call question earlier, request earlier, is that, I'm wondering, in your capacity as the UN Special Reporter on Cambodia, have you been considering using the Paris Peace Agreement as a tool in your monitoring, in monitoring the human rights situation in Cambodia? If so, I think it's very much relevant that you may consider, like using it as a tool for monitoring. And if not, why? And if yes, how? How will you proceed further? And my second question, and it refers to the UN Special Reporter, but also to the UN OHCHR here. We have witnessed the crackdown on the fundamental freedom harshly in Cambodia in recent months. And mainly, you know, freedom to expression, freedom to assembly, and freedom to association have been really, you know, under attack. But I would specific to the freedom to peaceful assembly that have been really affected. And when every time that civil society actor, the community representative come out on the street, the government would harshly crack down or, you know, block their activity, or most often, you know, these people will be put in jail and released afterward, but some will be in jail, like the case of Tevani. So when it comes to the peaceful assembly, I would link to the recent initiative by the civil society actor on the Black Monday. And there have been a let's say not misinterpretation, but there have been a different interpretation from the government and from civil society community like us. When we quickly launched that campaign, the Cambodian government quickly, you know, announced in an official kind of broadcast or announcement that this Black Monday is a colorful revolution, and it presumably justify it as an illegal gathering. Therefore, you know, I'm wondering. My question is that, you know, how would you use your role as a UN special reporter to make sure that we interpret this peaceful assembly rights properly and in line with the international human rights standards, but also for the UN OHCHR. I know that you have cooperated with the Ministry of Interior, come up with a kind of leaflet and guideline on how we exercise our peaceful assembly. And this has been very helpful, but when it comes to the real practice, when it comes to, you know, how we translate it into action, it's not that case. So how would you do, you know, with these recent, you know, differences or interpretation, and to make sure that we, Cambodian citizens, can really exercise our freedom to peaceful assembly? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the can I have just one more round? Yes. Okay, so don't worry. So you have a right to speak.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for the questions. They're very important issues in Cambodia today. The comments about national, regional and international issues, I think undoubtedly the Cambodian government is aware of and does take some cognizance of comments and criticisms in international fora, however they may be. So I think comments by ASEAN parliamentarians just under a year ago were noted. I think the comments of the IPU were also noted in their report. So I think a lot of these things are actually noted in the government. Equally, you can see the rhetoric in both the General Assembly and to a greater extent the Human Rights Council in the responses by the permanent representative and in the comments of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in New York, which are clearly responding to criticisms of other countries within the UN framework. So I would say it is noted. I think the pressure does and has the potential at least to cause an effect. Whether it's national, the civil society parliamentarians who are holding the government to account, I would like to see stronger holding of the government to account in legislative drafting to ensure it complies with human rights, for example. But I think there's a lot at the national level. There's equally a lot in ASEAN and in other regional entities, and there's a lot of pressure that can be brought with the UN. Ultimately, the ideal solution is that the pressure brought is peaceful and will result in a change of political will, because that's how international law normally operates. I do think it is useful to have, for example, the statement of 39 states last month in Geneva and the exchanges and interventions in June at the 10th anniversary session of the Human Rights Council. And I think the responses by the government in those formal forums indicate that they are taking note, even if they're disagreeing with the criticisms. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation did agree with me that sovereignty and human rights are not mutually exclusive, and they are in fact compatible. So you can have full respect for sovereignty whilst having human rights monitoring and a society that fully respects human rights. Looking at the MOU, it's obviously not a formal part of my role, and I'll obviously hand over to Ms Wan Hee Lee to comment directly on that from the UN perspective. From my perspective, it was raised by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he agreed that he would arrange a meeting in the future with Ms Wan Hee Lee and possibly other members of the UN in order to try and progress the agreement on the MOU. As far as I'm concerned, my mandate, and indeed the mandate of OHCHR, is derived currently from the Human Rights Resolution last October. So that's where my mandate derives from. Originally the Paris Peace Accords, but then it's subject to the review by the Human Rights Council. So that's what gives me my mandate, not the Paris Peace Accords. It comes from the UN Human Rights Council resolution. I think with the importance of the Paris Peace Accords, I think they are important. I've referenced them in my comments in Geneva last month. I've referenced the end of mission statement now, just literally before I jumped in the cab and came here. I do think they are important. I think they are worth celebrating and they are worth remembering. But most of my role is looking at the human rights obligations of Cambodia, both in the Universal Declaration and in those treaties they have voluntarily accepted after, which has happened, the Paris Peace Accords, and making sure as far as possible that national law gives effect to those treaty obligations. So yes, I do sometimes refer back, or I can refer back to the Paris Peace Accords, but I'm more likely to refer back to the Constitution or to Cambodian laws, because it's those that have to conform to international human rights standards. And yes, the Paris Peace Accords is important and is a tool, but that's what I'm looking at doing is the current law and applying that in a manner that is compatible. So would I consider using it as a tool? I would say I'm more likely to use as a tool the international treaties that Cambodia has accepted and look at trying to maintain compatibility or achieve compatibility between national law and those treaties. With freedom of expression and association, I think undoubtedly there is discrepancies with how the laws are applied in Cambodia. I did raise the issue of the World Habitat Day demonstration with the Phnom Penh Municipal Governor. I have repeatedly raised with the Minister of Interior, and when I meet provincial governors, the need to ensure the law and peaceful demonstration and the implementing guidelines of the MOI are complied with. I have regularly reminded these people that the presumption is in favour of the assembly or association, whatever it happens to be, not against it. It's a presumption, and it has to be notified in order to allow it to be facilitated, not in order to allow permission or blockage. I also regularly remind various people, I mean, whether it's provincial level or it's at the national level, I regularly remind various people that education facilities, education activities, sorry, I've not had any water since about 10 this morning, that's why I'm drinking water. So any activities that are educational in nature or any training activities are excluded from the law and peaceful demonstrations. They're automatically meant to take place. There's nothing in the law and peaceful demonstrations that says you can't have training or you can't have education activities. So these kind of things I have regularly reminded and raised awareness of. I think looking at colour revolution, yeah, I mean there's no reason why people can't wear whatever they like. I suggest to go along Norodom Boulevard just now and you'll find lots of people wearing black at the Thai embassy. There's nothing political to do with it whatsoever. I think that the solidarity is powerful. But I also think that, as I said earlier, human rights defenders are not necessarily political, and the mere act of standing up for human rights and defending human rights, of criticising the government in a constructive manner, does not mean you are a political activist. It means you're a human rights defender. And that's something that is provided for in international human rights law and in the Paris Peace Accords, when it talks about all Cambodians have got the rights, so it's there. And I think it's something that the government does need to be reminded of at all levels, and is by me. So I think that covers most of the issues, and Wang He can probably address some of the more specific ones on, obviously, the Memorandum of Understanding and the UN support for institutions. Okay, I've still got something all right.
I will touch on that, and just to comment personally, I think this is a very good idea to establish an institution to monitor the implementation of the Paris Peace Accord. I don't know what it would take to create such an institution, but it's worth pursuing. I believe one thing that has been very clear to us is in human rights we have well-established standards. We have well-established norms. In most countries around the world will have an international laws as well as a well-defined body of international human rights laws. That's not the same case in the field of democracy. And that's why we find ourselves at a loss sometimes, because every country has its own system, and there is no one that can say that it is right or wrong, other than does it allow or not the people to express their free choice. And that is maybe another area that more can be done on. We can't prescribe the system for every country, but the standards, I think, could benefit from being better defined, and probably that is why we come back to many of the human rights standards, because that's what there is. That's the closest we have to holding elections to a standard that are acceptable. The MOU, we have heard what the government is trying to tell us in regard to our MOU and why it is being prolonged. Operationally, that is a political message, and it's a message of substance to our High Commissioner. Our High Commissioner also has his own views, has made that known. Any MOU that respects our mandate, it's only that kind of an MOU that he could sign. He could not sign an MOU that will have us here unable to perform our functions, and that's where it stands. But the discussions are ongoing. Operationally, it does not affect us. We continue our work, we continue the monitoring, and we continue with the advocacy. Although it's not always well received.
Thank you very much. So probably this is the third and the last round. Let me see how many hands. 1, 2. Okay. So please identify yourselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerome. I'm a member of Parliament from CNRP. Thank you for the opportunity to ask. You might have heard that a couple months ago the EU issued a resolution in terms of human rights and to Cambodia, and also a couple of weeks ago we have a statement signed by 36 countries or 39 countries regarding to problem in Cambodia. But as you said, the government refused to accept that as a reality in Cambodia. They have a lot of saying against whatever they say outside Cambodia. And then we have problem. The Global Witness has come up with a very strong evidence of depleting the forest and so on. And then we heard about the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which is really put them in the quiet sound for a couple of weeks. Mean like they probably hear something's not very attractive to them. For me, the question is that if, in the future, if the abuse is not going to stop, because the statement come up again and again, but they refuse to accept it as a reality in Cambodia. But can we use the evidence from the Human Rights Commission and from other sources like EU resolution to take it to the ICJ. That's probably the only teeth that can put them into a position where they have to stand to protect themselves, and that will put into an international arena that they have to abide by international law. From global witness, they issue something, and then they, if it was in Cambodia, they probably take us to court and jail us already. But they ask whether they can take a global witness to court in London, but they apparently very quiet about it. So my question is, from what I said early on, can we use that as evidence and take it to ICJ in the future term? Is that a legally binding by the international law? That can you say something about it? Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Professor Rona Smith. My colleague say hello to you. She's a student, former student. So let me say congratulations to your appointment also, and I will try to say that again. I think when I read your report here, this was the first report that you are following through the previous report from your predecessors, Professor Subadi Sorias. I'm very impressed with those. And when these reports also, I think this is the most comprehensive information reports on different sectors. Especially you raised a lot of issue and recommendation on the land right issue in Cambodia, land right violations, which is the very important issue that the Prime Minister often reminded this country that if the land right violation continues to happen in Cambodia, Cambodia may experience revolutions or something like that. I think it's genuine awareness about that. So it's very encouraging to see all those issues and recommendations on the land rights issues. My interaction with the former human rights UN respondent reporters on Professor Subadi Soria was on two angles issues. One was related to the coordinations among civil society leaders to address the land rights issues, and the dialogues between the Prime Minister and the group of civil society organizations. I think I'm not sure if Professor Subadi have heard about the recent historical forums between the Prime Minister and the development partner in its NGO. But it was not like Junior's interactive dialogue, because there was almost 500 people, and he spoke most of the time there alone. That's not Junior's version. But at least he said something, his initiative he created almost 10 years ago is happening already beyond that once. My question to you is, with regard to the recommendation from A to Z, from A to X, there's 5 recommendations on related to the land right issues. So what is your plans in the next report to follow up the progress of these land rights implemented by the government here? Your mechanisms that you're going to follow up with the government here in terms of the progress and put into your next reports on those land rights issues? And what could be the role of civil society organizations like Forum Suits I'm working with here in terms of supporting this land rights issue? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for comments and questions. First, the technical international law question from you, Your Excellency. What I would say is that an EU Parliament resolution doesn't necessarily have strong legal force even within the EU. I've taught EU law for many years, I have to say, as well as international law. A UN Human Rights Council statement, similarly, doesn't have actual legal binding force. What they are is evidence of concern among states and international organisations, and they are very powerful tools for advocacy against the government of the state. The specific issue of going to the International Court of Justice, in terms of the statute of the International Court of Justice, only states have local standing for bringing, i.e. have the legal power to bring a complaint to the ICJ and appear before the ICJ, so it's only interstates, although there can be advisory opinions requested by the General Assembly. So for an actual litigation in terms of the International Criminal Court, it's state against state. So that's potentially a limitation. In human rights terms, there's only been one example of a case brought state against state alleging violation of a single international treaty, and that's the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and that was Georgia and the Russian Federation. That case was inadmissible ultimately because the parties failed to follow the requirements in the International Convention for the preliminary steps before bringing the case to the ICJ. Any of my students could have told them that was going to happen and they were arguing it, so they hadn't followed the preliminary stages. So the ICJ is limited. A lot of the pressure can more accurately be brought through political pressure and diplomatic pressure to try to change attitudes. The legal issue in the ICJ is for interstate. Looking at the issues on land rights and following up, I think Professor Subedi made a number of recommendations in a very comprehensive report that he and OHCHR has submitted and annexed to I can't remember which year it was, to one of his earlier annual reports to the Human Rights Council, and that covers in great detail many of the challenges with land and with land issues. I have raised some land issues with the government. With respect to mechanisms, there are various mechanisms available to a special rapporteur. Listing these things in the Human Rights Council is one of them. It brings them to attention of states. I also have meetings direct with government ministers on missions and raise issues and concerns direct with them. This is followed up by letters and various discussions with government by letter in between missions. And also there are formal mechanisms available when there are land disputes that I can use. I mean, I can ask OHCHR to investigate further and report back to me. OHCHR also are very active in investigating a number of land issues. Many of the civil society organisations represented in this room are very active in trying to find the facts for some of the land issues and in defending those whose land has been subject to concessions and giving them legal representation, and also giving them more general advocacy at the local level when trying to secure a resolution. So I think there's a lot that can be done, and civil societies are very active on land rights. I also can do formal communications processes for particular violations, and these are the formal mechanisms that a special rapporteur can use under the special rapporteur system. So these have been used for some related issues. They can only be in pure human rights violations. So there have been a few examples that are recorded, and they're also reported to the Human Rights Council, albeit in code, because we're not allowed to quote them all when they're in another UN document. So it's all the code with this HRC. So we have to reference them that way. But the Human Rights Council receives 3 times a year a full report of all the official communications in terms of special procedures to and from all special procedures and the government. So it's a confidential mechanism, and then they're published. So I think that answers that.
Just to say, there is so much to be done, and not any of these needs are guaranteed, but we do constantly, when there are human rights defenders who are arrested, who follow up together to be in close touch with us. We take this to the courts. When court cases are brought to them, you will have seen in the recent statements of the Special Rapporteur, as well as from our office, that we are now beginning to challenge the substance, the evidence that are being brought to trial, and challenging the judiciary to really justify its decision. I think we have to continue that path. Thank you to Transparency International for letting the judiciary understand what poor standing they have in the country. I think it was very hard to have a good discussion with them until Transparency geared up your work on that. All of this to say that the work from different parts of society, different organizations, we complement each other in important ways. And so right now I started to think that the sound started to sound a bit gloomy, as if things are looking really very dark in Cambodia. And although I agree it's very difficult now, I actually think it's bright. This is coming to light. That's why it looks so dark. It's because we're speaking about it. It's because people are turning it into an issue. I don't think I've ever seen a point in Cambodian history where so much came out, and that's why there's a counter-reaction. It's because you here have been successful. And so what's the best strategy is number one, I don't know what's 2, 3, 4 and the rest, but number one has got to be to keep doing what we're doing.
Okay, thank you very much for, let's give a big hand to so this is Professor Smith's last day of her mission, and she's leaving tomorrow early morning, 4 o'clock. So you must be very tired, but thank you once again for your time out of your busy schedule, and also Wani Lee. I know that you have a very heavy mission and difficult task, and also we also share the same mission and the task. Let's continue to work together to make Cambodia a more democratic and also human rights respected country. And I want to leave this meeting with a positive note. Why we chose this hotel? Name is Sunway. So we are looking for more sunny, more bright future. Not automatically, but we need to work very hard to make sure that we have a sunny future. Okay, thank you once again for your time. Let's give a big Okay, so can we have a few 5 minutes break before we have a final session? It's okay? Or we immediately? We have 5 minute session, right? No, okay. So let them go first, and then we can start immediately.